Daughter leaves her mother with just 5 bantams. 7 years later, her poultry farm was worth millions. Martha was kneeling on the ground when she heard the car pull away. It wasn't just any noise. It was that deep, costly sound that cuts through the stillness of the high plains in a way that stings in your chest. She didn't turn around. She stared at the 5 scrawny chickens pecking at the dust as if the world hadn't just changed around them. Her daughter had left, taken everything that was hers, left a suitcase with clothes that didn't fit anymore, and driven off down the road inside a grey car she had never seen before the boyfriend showed up in their lives. It had been a muggy morning, one of those where the sun is already hot before 8 in the morning and the ground cracks even more. Chloe appeared in the doorway with an expression Martha already knew, that mix of determination and guilt her daughter wore whenever she had made a decision and didn't want to argue anymore. "Mum, you know I love you," she said, standing on the threshold. "But I can't do this anymore. There's no future here, not for me, not for you." Martha looked at her 22-year-old daughter, unable to speak. She had so much she wanted to say, but the words got stuck in that deep place where we keep what hurts the most. "And the homestead?" was all that came out. Chloe looked away. "The chickens are staying. There are 5. You can manage. 5 chickens. On land that had been in the family for nearly 40 years, that Martha's father had built with his own hands before he passed, that she and her husband had tried to keep going for years until he also left by other paths. 5 chickens were all that remained of all of that. When the car disappeared at the far end of the dirt road, kicking up a cloud of dry dust, Martha went to the chicken coop and sat on the ground the way a person sits when their legs simply can't find a reason to stand anymore. The chickens kept pecking around her, indifferent to the depth of the silence that had arrived. She didn't cry then. The crying came at night, when the house felt empty in a way different from every other silence she had ever known. It was a silence that weighed. That occupied a chair. Look, I need to stop for a second here because that image won't leave my head. A woman alone in the middle of the dry land with 5 chickens around her, watching her daughter vanish over the horizon inside a car she could never afford. There's a pain in that scene that we recognize even if we haven't lived through the same. In the days that followed, Martha did what she knew how to do. She worked. She was a 42-year-old woman with hands calloused from years of farming, a stubborn streak that life had never managed to pull out, and a homestead nearly destroyed by the drought that had hit hard in that part of the high plains. She had no choice but to start from the little that was left. The closest neighbor, Mrs. Evelyn, showed up on the 3rd day. She was a 68-year-old woman, white hair, small frame, but with a presence that filled any space she entered. She had lived through things most people in the area couldn't even imagine, raised her kids alone after her husband got sick, and run a chicken farm that was a reference throughout the surrounding rural area. When she appeared leaning against the gate without ceremony, Martha knew it wasn't a condolence visit. "I saw the car leave the other day," Mrs. Evelyn said, looking straight into Martha's eyes. "Was that Chloe?" A nod was the answer. The old woman was quiet, looking at the poor chicken coop with those few birds. "Do you have anything to sell this week?" "I have 2 eggs. 2 eggs. Mrs. Evelyn didn't laugh, didn't look pitying, didn't say it was too little. She just looked at Martha with those eyes that had seen a lot. "Then you're going to need to learn a few things," she said. "If you want, you can come to my place early tomorrow." Martha went, and it was on that first day at the neighbor's farm that a turn began that she never could have imagined that morning when she sat on the dusty ground. Mrs. Evelyn's property was different from anything Martha knew. It wasn't huge, but it was organized with a precision that seemed almost mathematical. Everything in its place, each animal with the right space, clean water, feed on schedule. Decades of learning, without a single day of formal training, built only through trial and error and the attention that necessity teaches. "A chicken is a simple creature," Mrs. Evelyn explained as they walked among the fences. "But it demands respect. You treat it well, it gives back. You neglect it, it dies and takes your hope with it." Martha listened with a focus that only exists when you know you have no other choice. For 3 weeks straight, She went every day to the neighbor's property. She learned about feeding, about laying cycles, about how to spot disease before it spread through the entire coop, about how to make use of what she had without wasting what she lacked. She learned things no book could have taught in the same way, because what Mrs. Evelyn passed on wasn't just technique. It was a way of doing things. It was a way of seeing. And while she learned, the thought of Chloe lingered in the background the whole time, like a noise you try to push away, but can't silence. In the 5th month after her daughter left, Martha had 18 chickens. It wasn't easy getting there. She had sold a wall clock that had belonged to her mother to buy 6 chicks. She had borrowed a sack of corn from the neighbor across the way, promising to pay when she could. She had spent nights on her knees cleaning the coop with a determination bordering on anger, because physical work was the only thing that could keep the longing and the hurt in check. 18 chickens were a whole different story. They already laid enough eggs to sell at the farmer's market on Saturday morning, and it was at one of those markets that Martha met Mr. Howard. Howard was 56 years old, owned a small market in the county seat, and had the quick gaze of someone who sizes everything up before opening his mouth. When he tasted the egg that Martha brought for him to try, she had set aside 2 the day before, knowing the eggs were different from those of industrial farm chickens. He was quiet for a second. He cracked the egg into a mug, looked at the yolk before tasting. "Where does this color come from?" he asked. "From the corn mixed with green leaves that I feed them. The yolk comes out like that." He looked at her for a moment. "How much can you supply me per week?" Martha did the quick calculation in her head. At that point, it wasn't much. But she said a number a little higher than the truth, because she knew she could grow into it, and because necessity doesn't give you the luxury of hesitation. They closed a deal right there. That deal was the first brick of something Martha still couldn't see the full shape of. That's how it is with big constructions. When you're at the beginning, you only see the ground beneath your feet. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, be sure to hit like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. At the start of the 2nd year, everything almost fell apart. The drought returned with greater force than before, and 3 of the youngest chickens got sick within a week. Martha spent 3 sleepless nights doing what Mrs. Evelyn had taught her, mixing herbs with feed, changing water every hour, watching for every sign with an attention that cost more than her body could give. She lost 2 birds, but she saved the rest. Those 2 losses weighed more than the number suggested. It wasn't just animals. It was work. It was time. It was the dream those creatures carried without knowing. When she told Mrs. Evelyn, the old woman was quiet for a moment. Afterwards she said without drama, "When I lost my husband, I thought I wouldn't be able to keep the farm going. Everyone thought so too. But it's exactly when things seem impossible that we discover what we have inside." Martha didn't answer, but she stored that away in a deep place. It was around that same time that Chloe called, the first time since she had left, almost a year and a half of total silence. The conversation was short, full of empty space. "I called to see if you're okay," Chloe said. "I am." "And the homestead?" "Got chickens." Long pause. "You need anything?" "No." Chloe hung up without much more. Martha stood there holding the phone, staring at the kitchen wall. There was so much she could have said. She could have asked how her daughter's life was, if she was happy with Justin, if she was eating well. She could have said she missed her. She could have cried. She did none of that. Sometimes, when pain is stored away too long, it hardens inside and becomes hard to touch. What Martha didn't know at that moment was that Chloe had called from a rented apartment in Chicago, and that her life there was nowhere near what she had imagined when she got into that grey car and drove off down the road. But that part would come later. By the 3rd year, the farm had 140 chickens. Martha had managed to renovate the shed with the money from sales, had hired a local boy named Cody to help with the heavier work, and had started selling not only to Mr. Howard's market, but to 2 other establishments in the area. The homestead, which had struggled for years, was breathing again. Mrs. Evelyn came to visit when she heard about the growth. She walked through the new shed without hurry, eyeing everything with that appraising look of someone who had seen many things bloom and wither. "It's lovely," she said. "I learned from you," Martha replied. "You learned the start from me. The rest was you." There was a pride in that statement that didn't need embellishment, but it was around that same time that the most serious problem so far arose, not with the chickens, with the land. Martha discovered, almost by accident, in a conversation with a man who did land surveying in the area, that there was an old dispute over the boundaries of the homestead. An area of nearly 2 hectares that she used as pasture was in a grey zone in the documents, and there was a man in town who had started claiming that strip of land was his. That man's name was Sterling, 58 years old, grey hair, a suit that seemed too expensive for the high plains. He showed up one day at the edge of the road with a paper in his hand and an expression of someone who was certain of what he was saying. "This here is my area," he said, indicating the stretch of land where Martha's chickens grazed. She looked at him with a calm she herself didn't know where it came from. "I have a document that says otherwise." "Your document is outdated." The dispute was long and draining. It consumed energy that Martha needed for other things. She spent weeks searching for old papers, talking to people who knew the history of the land before her, listening to stories that came and went about boundaries and borders. It was during one of these searches that she found a box of her father's papers, stored under some planks at the back of the old shed. Inside were letters, yellowed receipts, and at the bottom of the box, a land survey document done decades ago with a notarized seal that clearly established the boundaries of the homestead, including the 2 hectares that Sterling was claiming. When Martha showed up with that paper, Sterling backed down. Not all at once. It was a slow retreat, with muttering and a sour face, the kind a person makes when they know they've lost, but don't want to admit it right away. But he backed down, and Martha kept the land. Some things life gives back with interest, and sometimes the interest is exactly the strength you gained fighting for it. With the land secure, growth gained speed. In the 4th year, she invested in a water supply system that used a natural spring on the property that had never been fully utilized. In the 5th year, she got into raising free-range chickens for restaurants, looking for a more natural product, in addition to the eggs she was already supplying. The farm stopped being just a means of survival and became a real business. Mr. Howard was the go-between in the first negotiations with the restaurants. He had connections she didn't, and he did it without asking for anything beyond the continued supply of eggs to his market. There was a loyalty in that partnership that Martha learned to treasure carefully. In the 6th year, the farm already had over 800 birds, 2 full-time employees and 1 seasonal worker, and supplied an entire regional network. It was unrecognizable to anyone who had seen what it was before. I keep thinking, how many people looked at that ruined homestead back then and thought it couldn't be fixed? And what would have happened if Martha had believed that too? It was in the middle of the 6th year that Chloe called again. This time, her voice was different, more tired, more honest. "Mom, Justin and I aren't together anymore." Martha was quiet. "It's been 3 months. I couldn't talk about it before. Why not?" "Because you'd tell me I knew it was going to happen, that I should have stayed. I couldn't handle hearing that." Martha took a deep breath. "I would never say that," she said finally. "Mom, you're my daughter, no matter what happened." Chloe cried on the other end, and Martha, alone in the kitchen of the house she had rebuilt brick by brick, felt something she couldn't quite name, a relief and a pain arriving together, the kind of emotions that don't separate. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and hit like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us beginners. Now back to the story. The reunion didn't happen over the phone. 3 weeks after that call, late one November afternoon, a car stopped in front of the homestead. It wasn't an expensive grey car. It was a modest car, a little dented on one side, the kind that shows life has been lived without any slack. Chloe got out with a backpack. She was 29, hair still dark, but her expression was completely different. The confidence of someone who was sure of everything, which she had worn when she left, was gone. In its place was something quieter, more real. Martha was in the barn when Cody told her she had a visitor. She walked to the entrance, wiping her hands on her apron. Mother and daughter looked at each other for a moment that lasted longer than the clock measured. "It looks different here," Chloe said, looking around. "It does. Really different." Martha waited, without hurry. Chloe looked at the new barn, the well-built fences, the installed waterers, the bustle of healthy chickens, where before there had only been dust and 5 scrawny birds. "Did you do all this alone, Mum?" "Not entirely," Martha replied. "Mrs. Evelyn taught me a lot. Mr. Howard opened the first markets. Cody has been a partner since the 2nd year." She paused for a second. "But the land is mine, the work is mine." "That much is true." Chloe stared at her mother as if trying to fit something into place that didn't quite fit like before. "I can't believe it," she said softly. "What?" "I left thinking you'd sell the homestead in 6 months, that it was impossible." Martha was quiet for a moment. "I never said it was impossible," she answered. "No, you never said anything. You just watched while I left." That hit like a stone. But Martha didn't flinch. "What did you want me to say?" "That I needed you." It was true that I was scared. It was true that I was angry for a while. That too. But you had the right to go. I knew that. Chloe closed her eyes for a second. "I was so wrong with you, Mum." "You were human, there's a difference." The hug that followed wasn't quick. It was the kind that lingers, that carries 7 years inside, that has weight and smell and the warmth of everything that had been pent up. Mrs. Evelyn showed up the next day, as if she had sensed something had changed in the air. She found Chloe in the kitchen helping Martha prepare breakfast and stood watching the two with a small smile that needed no words. "The daughter came back," she said, like someone stating a simple fact. "She came back," Martha confirmed. Mrs. Evelyn looked at Chloe closely. "Your mother has a gift," the old woman said. "It's not just with bantams, it's with endurance, with not giving up when everything tells you to give up. That can't be taught, that's lived." Chloe stared at her for a moment. "I know," she said. "Now I truly know." But the story hadn't revealed everything yet. 3 days after Chloe's return, a man showed up at the homestead whom Martha didn't expect. It wasn't Sterling, who had been quiet for a while. It was Gregory, a representative from a state farmers' co-op that was putting together a network of certified producers to supply larger supermarket chains. 45 years old, round glasses, briefcase in hand. He had come through Mr. Howard, who had recommended Martha as one of the most serious producers he knew in the region. Gregory explained the proposal in detail: a long-term contract, guaranteed volume, fixed price with periodic review. It was exactly the kind of partnership that turns a survival business into something lasting. Martha listened without interrupting. Then she looked at Chloe, who was sitting beside her listening too. "Can you handle the volume?" Gregory asked. "Today, no," Martha said. "But in 8 months, yes." Gregory nodded. "We have that time." When he left, Chloe looked at her mother. "You'll need to expand the shed, more employees, capital to grow fast." "I know." "I have some savings set aside," Chloe said, and her tone wasn't one of sacrifice or guilt. It was determination. "It's not a lot, but it helps to start. If you want, I can stay here and work together. I learned to make spreadsheets, organize costs. I learned things that can be useful here." Martha looked at her daughter for a long moment. 7 years. 7 years of distance, silence, stored-up longing, solitary work on the dry ground. And now her daughter back, with a backpack and a sincere offer. "Why do you want to stay?" she asked. Not out of distrust, out of care. Chloe thought before answering. "Because I spent 7 years trying to prove I could make it without this place." She looked around at the land, at the shed, at the open sky above the hills. "And I proved it. But I found out that being free isn't the same as being far away. That sometimes you leave to find who you are and come back different, but you come back." "You won't regret staying?" "I'll regret a lot of things in life," Chloe replied. but not staying. In the following months, the expansion happened methodically. Chloe brought financial organization that the homestead had never had, not because Martha didn't know how to handle money, but because she had never had a trusted partner to share that part. The shed expanded. The number of birds surpassed 3,000. The contract with the co-op was signed, and within it came others, a restaurant from a neighboring town, an organic market, a school that provided meals for students. It had reached the 7th anniversary of the day Chloe left. Martha was sitting on the same patch of ground where she had knelt watching the car disappear. The land was still dry, but not in the same way. The dust had settled differently. There were roots now. She held in her hand a document that Gregory had helped formalize, the official appraisal of the farm with all the contracts, the recorded production, and the land value included. The number written there was a number she never would have imagined on that morning years ago, when her only company was 5 mistreated bantams and a pain that couldn't fit into words. Chloe came up from behind, a cloth over her shoulder after a full day's work. "Ready for dinner?" she asked. Martha folded the document calmly and stood up. "Let's go." Mrs. Evelyn had been invited to dinner. She showed up right on time, carrying an embroidered tablecloth she had made years ago and never used. "For today," she said, handing it to Martha. Over dinner at one point, Chloe asked in a low voice, "Mum, were you angry with me? Really?" The table went quiet for a second. Martha thought carefully before answering. "I was," she said, "but the anger went away sooner than I expected. What stayed was longing, and longing kept me standing more than anything else, because I wanted that when you came back, if you came back, you'd see something that was worth it. Not for me, for you." Chloe didn't reply. She closed her eyes for a second, with that way of someone trying to hold back something that wants to come out. Mrs. Evelyn drank her coffee calmly, looked at the two of them, and said softly, "That's what a mother does. She works with the longing instead of working against it." There were no more words at the table that night, but there was something that didn't need words. A peace built brick by brick, bantam by bantam, day by day, through 7 years of dry ground and calloused hands, and outside in the warm dark of late night the coop was full. End of story. This story stayed with me for a long time after I finished reading it, because it's not just about chickens, it's not about money. It's about what a woman does when she's left with nothing, and about what we discover when we stop running. If this story touched you in any way, tell us in the comments what you felt. Do you think Martha did the right thing by welcoming her daughter back the way she did? Leave your opinion. I read everyone carefully. A like and a subscription to the channel mean a lot to us who are building this here. Heartfelt thanks for your company.